In the forest of Jetavana, the young Ananda arrived, carrying his troubled heart and seeking the Buddha's wisdom. Blessed one. My thoughts are consumed by doubt, Ananda began, his voice trembling as leaves in a restless breeze. I fear my partner has betrayed me, he continued, and my heart feels torn apart by suspicion and uncertainty. The Buddha looked upon Ananda with deep compassion, his gaze serene as the silent moon above. Ananda, come closer and sit, the Buddha said, motioning to the shaded spot beneath the ancient Bodhi tree. Your doubt, like dark clouds, has obscured the radiant sun of your inner peace, he remarked, his voice steady and kind. Tell me, how does this suspicion arise? The Buddha asked, leaning forward slightly, his robes resting softly on the earth. Ananda hesitated, searching for words to express the storm within his heart, his eyes fixed on the forest floor. It began with small moments, Ananda admitted. The glances, the silences, the gaps in understanding, each adding to my unease. The Buddha nodded, his gentle smile encouraging Ananda to continue speaking, unburdening the weight of his fears. These moments grew into stories within my mind, Ananda said, his hands clenched tightly together. Stories of betrayal, pain, and loss. The Buddha listened with unwavering attention, his presence calming the waves of turmoil within Ananda's soul. Ananda, the Buddha began softly, our thoughts are seeds, and the garden of our mind is shaped by what we nurture. If we water the seeds of doubt, he explained, they grow into brambles that ensnare and obscure our path. Would you trust the whispers of the wind over the clarity of the sun? The Buddha asked, his tone thoughtful. No. Blessed one, Ananda replied, shaking his head, the whispers may carry illusions, while the sun reveals what is true. Exactly, the Buddha said, his hands resting gently on his knees. Doubt arises not from truth but from the shadows of fear, he continued. Let me tell you a story of a farmer who doubted his neighbor for stealing his prized ox. The farmer's mind grew restless, suspicious of every word and every movement of his neighbor, the Buddha shared, his voice serene. Yet the ox returned, having wandered into the forest, unharmed, the Buddha concluded, his eyes reflecting wisdom. What did the farmer gain from his suspicions? The Buddha asked, pausing to let the question sink into Ananda's heart. Nothing. Blessed one, Ananda responded, his voice steady but tinged with realization. He only caused himself and his neighbor pain. The Buddha leaned forward, his voice quiet yet resonant. Do not let the poison of doubt corrupt the purity of your trust. Trust is not certainty, Ananda, the Buddha said, but the courage to accept what cannot be controlled or fully known. Your partner's actions may remain a mystery, he admitted, but the truth of your own heart is within your grasp. Ananda nodded, the Buddha's words planting new seeds of reflection and acceptance within the fertile soil of his soul. But what if my trust is broken? Ananda asked hesitantly, fearing the fragility of the path he was being guided upon. Then trust again, the Buddha said, his gaze unwavering, like the river that flows despite the rocks in its way. Each moment is an opportunity to begin anew. Ananda, the Buddha said, his voice soothing as a lullaby. Do not imprison yourself within the walls of doubt, he urged. Allow trust to become the foundation of your freedom. The path to trust is not without effort, the Buddha acknowledged. It requires mindfulness and the courage to face uncertainty. Can you walk this path, Ananda, with patience and faith? The Buddha asked, his words echoing like ripples in still waters. I will try. Blessed one, Ananda replied, his voice filled with both determination and humility. But it feels so challenging. Challenges test the strength of your resolve, the Buddha said, his hands now folded in a gesture of meditation. Do you remember the story of the bird that built its nest in the midst of raging storms? He asked. Yes. Blessed One, Ananda replied. It found peace and resilience. Despite the winds and rains that surrounded it. Be like that bird, the Buddha encouraged. Build your trust as a nest that shelters you amid the storms of doubt. His voice carried a quiet strength, a reminder that even the smallest actions can lead to profound transformations. Now, Ananda, the Buddha said, close your eyes and reflect upon what trust means to you. In the depths of your heart, Ananda obeyed, his breath slowing as he ventured into the stillness of his inner world. Seeking clarity within, the Buddha remained silent, allowing the forest to sing its gentle lullabies of rustling leaves and flowing streams. After a time, Ananda opened his eyes, his gaze softer yet more focused. Blessed One, I feel something shifting within me. Good. Ananda, the Buddha replied, his voice warm as morning sunlight. The journey to trust begins within, never outside. Ananda bowed deeply, his heart lighter than it had been in countless days. Thank you, Blessed One, for your wisdom. The Buddha smiled, his presence a beacon of hope for Ananda and all who sought the light of truth and peace. The night settled over Jetavana, but within Ananda's heart, a new dawn had begun. Illuminated by the Buddha's teachings, another day dawned in Jetavana, the forest alive with birdsong and the gentle rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. Ananda approached the Buddha once again, his mind restless and searching for further guidance on the nature of trust. Blessed One, Ananda began, his voice steady yet filled with longing. I still struggle with the impermanence of all things. The Buddha smiled gently, motioning for Ananda to sit beneath the shade of the great Bodhi tree where wisdom often unfolded. Ananda, look around you, the Buddha said, his hand gesturing to the flowing river nearby. What do you see? I see the river, its waters glistening under the sunlight, always moving, never still, Ananda replied. Observing its gentle flow, the Buddha nodded, his gaze fixed on the river. Its waters are never the same, yet it continues to nourish life. Impermanence is not a cause for despair. Ananda, the Buddha said, it is the essence of existence, the dance of life. Ananda frowned slightly, his thoughts churning like the river. But how can trust endure in a world of constant change? The Buddha leaned forward, his voice calm as the flowing stream. Trust is not a fixed rock, but a moving current. Consider the lotus flower. Ananda, the Buddha continued. It blooms in the muddiest waters, yet remains untouched and pure. Ananda's eyes brightened, his thoughts shifting. So trust, like the lotus, can flourish even in uncertain conditions? The Buddha nodded, his smile gentle and reassuring. Trust thrives not in resistance but in acceptance of impermanence. Ananda, let me share a story with you, the Buddha said, his voice steady as he began the tale of a young tree. The tree grew on a hill, swaying with the wind, fearful of the storms that tested its resilience, the Buddha said, but as the winds passed, the tree stood taller, its roots deeper, its trunk stronger, the Buddha explained. Pausing briefly, change did not harm the tree. Ananda, the Buddha added, it shaped it, allowed it to grow and thrive. Can you learn from the tree? Ananda, the Buddha asked, can you bend with life's changes without breaking your spirit? I will try. Blessed One, Ananda replied, his voice imbued with determination and the seeds of understanding beginning to sprout. The Buddha continued, trust is not about clinging to permanence but about embracing the flow of life. Like the river, Ananda gazed at the river again, its waters reflecting sunlight, each ripple reminding him of the transient nature of existence. Look at the river, Ananda, the Buddha said. Its constant movement does not diminish its beauty or its purpose. Trust is fluid, evolving with time, the Buddha explained. It is a practice of courage, not a guarantee of certainty. What does this mean for my relationship? Ananda asked, his voice carrying the weight of his question's significance. It means you must allow trust to grow. With each moment, Ananda, the Buddha answered, do not fear its changing form. Let trust be like the river's flow. The lotuses bloom, the tree's growth, the Buddha encouraged. His words resonant. Ananda nodded, the clarity of the Buddha's teaching unfolding in his heart like petals opening to the morning sun. But what if the changes lead to pain? Blessed One? Ananda asked hesitantly, fearing the vulnerability of embracing impermanence. Pain is part of the journey. Ananda, the Buddha said. It teaches us and deepens our understanding of life's truth. Even in pain, trust can endure, the Buddha added. It is the foundation that supports us through the storms of doubt. Let me share another story. Ananda, the Buddha said, his voice steady as the rustling leaves overhead. There was once a woman who feared the changes brought by aging, worrying it would diminish her worth and happiness. She avoided mirrors, rejected companionship, and allowed her fear of impermanence to isolate her, the Buddha said. Pausing slightly, but one day, she observed the changing seasons, the flowers that bloomed and withered, the cycle of growth and renewal. She realized that each stage of life carried its own beauty and wisdom. And she embraced her journey with trust. Ananda listened, his heart absorbing the truth embedded within the Buddha's tale, his mind reflecting on his own fears of change. Change is not an enemy. Ananda, the Buddha said. It is the teacher that guides us toward acceptance and resilience. Your partner may change. Your relationship may evolve. But trust is the anchor that keeps you grounded, the Buddha explained. Ananda sat silently, his thoughts flowing like the river, his heart opening to the wisdom the Buddha imparted. The path to trust is not without challenges, the Buddha acknowledged. It requires patience, courage, and the willingness to let go. Can you walk this path, Ananda? The Buddha asked, his gaze steady and his voice a beacon of encouragement. I will try. Blessed One, Ananda replied, his voice firm and his heart lighter than it had been before. Remember, Ananda, the Buddha said, the river does not resist the rocks in its path. It flows around them. Be like the river, the Buddha encouraged. Allow your trust to adapt and grow. Never stagnant, always moving forward. The Buddha paused, allowing the sounds of Jetavana to fill the silence, the rustling leaves carrying his teachings further. Ananda closed his eyes, breathing deeply, his thoughts calming and his heart finding peace in the Buddha's wisdom. Blessed One, Ananda said after a time, I feel I understand now. Trust is not fragile but resilient and evolving. The Buddha smiled, his eyes radiating warmth and encouragement. Good, Ananda. Let trust be your guide through life's impermanence. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden hues across Jetavana, the forest a reflection of life's constant changes. Ananda bowed deeply, his gratitude evident in his expression. Thank you, Blessed One, for your teachings and for your patience. The Buddha's smile deepened, his presence a source of peace and inspiration for all who sought wisdom in Jetavana. Another day unfolded in Jetavana, the forest alive with serenity, the air carrying the scent of blossoming flowers. Ananda approached the Buddha, his steps slow, his heart seeking resolution for the lingering unrest he felt within. Blessed One, I see the truth of impermanence, Ananda began, his voice steady yet filled with yearning for deeper understanding. But how can I find inner peace, he continued, when my mind remains tethered to fears of betrayal and doubt? The Buddha gazed at Ananda with profound compassion, his presence calm as the silent moonlight reflecting on tranquil waters. Sit with me, Ananda, the Buddha said, motioning to the ground beneath the ancient Bodhi tree, its roots grounded in wisdom. Your mind is like the surface of a turbulent lake, he remarked. Let us still the waters together and see clearly. Ananda settled beside the Buddha, his breath uneven as he prepared to confront the storms within his thoughts. Peace does not come from controlling others, Ananda, the Buddha began. It arises from understanding yourself and the nature of your mind. But Blessed One, Ananda asked hesitantly, how can I release the fears that weigh heavily upon my heart each day? The Buddha raised his hand, pointing to the sky above. Observe the clouds, Ananda. They drift, changing shape, then vanish. The clouds are like your thoughts, the Buddha explained. They arise, linger, and pass, never staying, never truly binding you. Ananda tilted his head, his gaze fixed on the sky. But how can I stop these thoughts from consuming me? Blessed One, do not fight them. Ananda, the Buddha answered. Sit in silence, observe them, and let them flow without resistance. Let me share a story with you. Ananda, the Buddha said, his voice steady, inviting reflection and contemplation. There was once a man who carried a heavy sack everywhere he went. Believing it contained treasures he must protect, he grew weary from its weight. Yet his fear of losing the sack prevented him from ever setting it down. But one day, he opened the sack and discovered it was filled not with treasures but with stones, the Buddha shared. He laughed and let the sack go. His heart lighter, his step free, the Buddha concluded, his tone calm. What does this story teach you, Ananda? The Buddha asked, his voice inviting the young disciple's thoughts to emerge. It teaches me that my fears may be heavier than their reality, and I carry them unnecessarily, Ananda replied. The Buddha nodded, his smile serene. Release the sack of fears, Ananda. Trust that you need not carry their weight. Peace is found not in holding but in letting go, the Buddha said. Let your heart be as light as air. Ananda breathed deeply, his thoughts turning inward, searching for the strength to release the doubts that had burdened him. But what if my fears return? Blessed One? Ananda asked, fearing the recurrence of the storms that had plagued him. They may return, Ananda, the Buddha admitted. But each time they do, greet them as visitors, not as masters of your mind, visitors. Blessed One? Ananda questioned, his curiosity sparked. How can I treat such troubling thoughts as mere visitors? Imagine a home, Ananda, the Buddha said. The doors open for guests, but they do not stay. They come and go. Let your mind be that home, the Buddha advised. Let your thoughts enter, observe them, and gently guide them out. Ananda nodded, his heart absorbing the wisdom offered by the Buddha's words, his breath growing steadier and calmer. Let me share another story. Ananda, the Buddha continued, his tone soothing as the rustling leaves overhead. There was once a lotus flower that bloomed in muddy waters, untouched by the filth surrounding its roots. The lotus found its beauty not in avoiding the mud, but in rising above it to seek the light, the Buddha shared. You, Ananda, must be like the lotus, the Buddha said. Rise above the mud of fear and doubt within your mind. Let your trust bloom. Untainted, radiant, the Buddha encouraged. Its roots grounded in wisdom, its petals seeking truth. Ananda listened, his heart awakening to the imagery of the lotus, his mind envisioning its strength and purity amidst adversity. Blessed One, I feel something changing within me, Ananda said. It feels like the weight of fear is lifting slowly. Good, Ananda, the Buddha replied, his voice warm as sunlight. Peace is not achieved suddenly. It is cultivated, moment by moment. Can you sit in silence, Ananda, and observe your thoughts without attachment, without judgment? The Buddha asked. I will try. Blessed One, Ananda responded, his voice steady, his heart ready to embrace the teachings offered to him. The Buddha remained silent, allowing Ananda to close his eyes and venture inward, his breath steadying with each passing moment. The forest around them grew still. the sounds of nature quieting as Ananda's thoughts drifted like clouds across a vast sky. After a time, Ananda opened his eyes, his gaze clearer, his heart lighter. Blessed One, I feel I am beginning to understand. Good, Ananda, the Buddha said, his smile reflecting the wisdom of countless ages. Understanding is the first step toward peace. Do you see now that peace is not found in others but within yourself? The Buddha asked, his tone inviting. Yes. Blessed One, Ananda replied. I see that my fears were clouds obscuring the truth within my own heart. Then let the clouds part. Ananda, the Buddha said, let the sun of your inner peace shine upon your mind. Let trust become the anchor that grounds you, the Buddha encouraged. Not in certainty, but in acceptance and resilience. Ananda bowed deeply, his gratitude evident in his expression. Thank you, Blessed One, for guiding me through this journey. The Buddha smiled, his presence a source of strength and inspiration for Ananda and all who sought peace in Jetavana. The day faded into evening, the golden hues of sunlight reflecting the wisdom shared and absorbed within the sacred forest. Ananda walked away, his heart lighter than it had been, his thoughts clearer, his trust in the path ahead renewed. I closed my eyes. What do you feel? The Buddha asked, his voice harmonizing with the river's song, blending seamlessly with the world around him. Thank you for watching. Buddha's teachings are always with you. Subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next video.